And so that's the way you bring the psychological element of the logos and the material element together. And those have to be united as well, or you're in a state of disunion. So that's how I would respond to that.
Well, what I'm learning from this conversation is I'm a Greek philosopher, Jordan.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to note. Like, look, I went and talked to Richard Dawkins about these sorts of things, and Dawkins, I was trying to pin him down so he would talk to me, and it took quite a bit of negotiating back and forth, because he's a skeptical guy and he didn't trust me, and he kept writing me these kind of dismissive emails. He'd say, I don't know why you want to talk to me. I don't really understand anything you're saying. But then eventually he said, but I think maybe it has something to do with this. And he sent me this paper, which I had read 3 decades earlier, one of his papers. I learned a lot from Dawkins. Like, I think Dawkins is a genuine scientist. And in that paper, he made the claim that every organism has to be a microcosm of its environment. So he said, for example, that if you were an alien and someone gave you a duck, an earth duck. That's an awkward phrase, but you get the point. A duck from Earth. That you could infer all sorts of things about the Earth's environment by taking the duck apart. The density of the atmosphere, the fact that it was oxygenated, the amount of gravity that was characteristic of the surface, the presence of water, the relative preponderance of elements in the natural environment. The structure of the environment is built into the organism. And there's an ancient medieval idea, it's even older than that the human being is a microcosm and reflects the macrocosm. And that's exactly the case that Dawkins was making. And I thought, you do know why I want to talk to you, because that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you. And so, following that logic, you could say, well, there's a reflection of the cosmic order within you. And that reflection is there because you have adapted to the world. You are adapted to the world in the deepest parts of you, in the deepest recesses of you. And if you consult with that microcosmic embodiment, then it will reveal intuitions that will move you forward. But those intuitions, this is where I think the crucial difference in the approach we're both taking at the moment reveals itself. See, you're thinking about that as something that's personal. And it is personal in the sense that it speaks to you personally. But it's impersonal in that thing is there whether you're here or not. It's no different than the Socratic daemon. And it's no different than the voice of intuition that speaks to other people.
What's the
or at
evidence
least it has
for that
important
claim?
commonalities.
What's the evidence for the claim that it's there whether I'm here or not?
Well, because other people have spoken of the same thing.
But
now, I'm not saying there isn't an element of it that's unique to you. There is.
No, my point is this.
There's an element that's unique to you.
Just because I have a hat and you have a hat doesn't mean that the hat is something that we share in common that's given to us from above. We can all have our own hat.
Okay, I would say hat's the wrong metaphor because it's purely a cultural construct. And so your metaphor falls prey to the inadequacy of a postmodern viewpoint. Let's think of a different example.
All right, you have
different example.
You have your
anger.
own teeth. Okay.
Anger.
Fine. Right.
Let's use anger.
Yes.
Okay, so then we might say, well, what sort of being is anger? And it's definitely the case that you get angry in your own way. But it's also the case that if you get angry, everyone can tell that you're angry. And part of the reason they can tell is because they get angry enough like you to understand what the hell's possessing you.
Fine.
And so this is part of the collective unconscious problem. That's another way of thinking about it, or part of the problem that we share universal biologically predicated motivational and emotional structures. There's an element of it that is idiosyncratic and that's unique to you. And, religiously speaking, that would be the personal nature of your relationship with God, which isn't trivial. But then there's a universality of it, right? Because if your intuitions, for example, were so idiosyncratic that no one else at all experienced them, you could not communicate with anyone else. You certainly couldn't live with other people, right? You'd be so far afield from the norm. And this does happen to people, by the way, who are absolute creative geniuses from time to time. But most of the time, that voice that's speaking to you speaks in a voice that's similar to the manner in which the voice speaks to other people. Which is also why I think we have something like a universality of conscience.
It's an interesting thought, but I'm still not persuaded by that. If two cans of Coke both have the same shape, does that mean they're connected?
Well, they're connected in some ways because you wouldn't use the word same otherwise, right? Because you're implying a connection by the fact
I'm implying similarity.
of their identity.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's what I mean. You're implying similarity, and similarity is a very complex concept. I mean, you
Look,
might say that things are.
From
Go
a
ahead.
spiritual point of view, I'm actually not in disagreement with you. I had a very interesting experience. I studied hypnosis for a long time. And in hypnosis, there is an exercise that you can do. I talked about this when we were on Joe Rogan's show, called the deep trance identification. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but what they do is essentially, once someone is in the deep state of trance, your identity can be treated sort of like a set of clothes that you can take off and put on someone else's identity in that state and try it out. And people will often use this to pick up the habits of people that they wish to emulate or things like that. And when we were doing these exercises in this hypnosis class, first I did it with this very sweet, gentle South African lady who wanted to try on some kind of American preacher. And when we went through the process with her and she opened her eyes, she was that guy. Right, it was. I had to run out of the room because that's how much it scared me, actually, that this was possible.
Oh yeah.
But when I did it, I had a different. I'm very disagreeable generally, so I try to be difficult whenever I'm doing anything like this. So rather than being a person, I went, what if I try to identify as the universe, whatever that is, in this process, right? And when I was doing this, all I could feel was my heartbeat slowed down, and it was really the only thing that I was conscious of as it was happening. And I could feel my heart expanding. And the two things happened simultaneously. One, I felt an infinite connection with all other human beings in that moment. And the second thing I felt, and this was just, I'm not saying this is what it is, and I'm not making any truth claim about it, but this is what I experienced at the time. You know how the universe is expanding? And it's expanding at an accelerating rate. The thing that, I mean, I want to say popped into my head, but it didn't feel like it popped into my head. The thing that I experienced was, what if the universe expanding is a half a heartbeat of some greater organism to which we're all connected? So I am entirely open to the possibility that we are connected. And the truth is that part of my hesitation to call myself religious is not even the bearded guy in the sky in whom I don't believe, because I don't believe in him. It's also the fact that I'm just very wary of organized religion being a perverted way of